Listen, I'm making this video knowing full well I know literally nothing about the Bronze Age fashions. I think the only things I do know is the Bronze Age Egtveg skirt and that one statue of a Minoan woman with her boubage all out. When it comes to Nolan's newest movie, I mean, it's clearly fantasy. We have Cyclops, we have giants, we have a witch that's turning people into pigs, we have magic flowers, we have a woman that was born from an egg, and literal gods walking the earth. I think we have such strong reactions to the movie because A, Homer's works and Greek mythology in general have been such crucial elements in Western culture, and also B, even though fictional, this story is rooted in particular culture, region, and beliefs, so we sort of expect the adaptation to reflect that a little bit. I honestly think it's the case of The Witcher again, where we expected at least an homage to the culture that the work was born from, and we got none. But similarly to The Witcher, there are some other issues that are not related to history at all that just make the costumes a little odd. Even if we do treat the movie as pure fantasy, which it is, there is so many things about the costumes that just ruin the suspension of disbelief for me. I had a little nerdy notebook at the cinema because I didn't want to use my phone to make notes, and here are some of the notes that I made during the movie. Why does armor look so cheap? Tunic looks H&M, very Zara. Batman armor looks like a perfume commercial. Oscar's red carpet, fantasy ball, 2010 prom, Disney ass armor, giving rain. What I find the funniest though is that throughout the whole movie, analyzing the costumes, I was just thinking, wow, Bridgerton has really done a number on costume design. It has really changed the approach to costume design in modern cinema. And then I didn't know that the costume design was in fact done by Ellen Mirojnick, who is responsible for the iconic season 1 costumes. So that makes a lot of sense. This is the problem that I have with modern costume design in general. And it happened in Wuthering Heights, it happened in Bridgerton, and it happened again here. It's completely fine if you don't want the clothing to look historical. It's okay to be creative and take artistic liberties. It is encouraged even, because we don't want to be stuck with the same costumes and purely historical vibes. But when your actors end up looking like they know what Instagram is, you've done something wrong. And there have been so many instances when I was watching the movie just thinking like, they have an iPhone, come on. So let's break down the costumes actually. There is a lot of earthy tones being used, which is not surprising because almost every movie that is set in the past, or at least pre-19th century, pre-18th century, is gonna be drabby. It's gonna be gray and the colors are gonna be toned down. It's this assumption that naturally derived dyes were not as strong as chemical dyes, which is true a little bit, but we tend to tone it down so much that there is barely any color in movies and series set in the past, and that's just not true. But anyway, they went for earthy tones, which again, not surprising. They also went for organic fabrics such as linen and sometimes I think silk. There is a lot of black leather, which seems like a lazy choice for menswear. Like every time I watch a movie where men are fighting and being very manly, there's gotta be some black leather involved. Telemachus is wearing a leather skirt. Antonius is wearing basically a black villain-like vest, very punk rock style leather. There is this particular Batman style metal armor that I would say is very on the nose. It's like very, ooh, I'm so dark. The back of it has ominous spine-like decoration. Both Nolan and Ellen actually defended the use of black steel based on some extant examples, but I think people don't really criticize the color, they criticize the finish. If your ancient armor has a sports car-like finish, if it looks too much Tesla, it's going to take people out of the story. And that's my problem with most of the armor in the movie. Why is it so smooth? Why does it look brand new? Why is it so matte? Like, how do you get a matte finish on an ancient armor? Why does it look 3D printed and not handmade? Part of it could be that it just doesn't read that well on camera, especially given the IMAX quality, but part of it seems like just not digging deep enough to get that ancient feel. I found this random Reddit comment that actually sums up beautifully what I think is lacking in modern costume design and what I've been saying for years. I'm not saying that costume design has to follow historical norms, historical silhouettes, and historical standards. But by knowing and understanding the era that the movie or a piece of work is supposedly based around, you can actually use that to your benefit, and you can include so many details that perfectly build the world you're trying to create. Anyway, here is the Reddit comment. I don't think people truly understand how much information the clothing gives you in the audience. And this movie is no exception. Yes, we all understand that it's not meant to be a documentary about the Bronze Age, but the myth has basis in a point in our timeline as humans. It is why we associate with it. Why not use this as a starting point for the visuals in the movie? When creating costumes, you need basic information. Yes, you can just make something up, but this can be hard to relate to as an audience member. It is more than just looking cool. In this case, we have roughly time, place, and environment. We even have examples of clothing and life. We can look at what natural materials they had access to, what kind of fibers, animals, and metals to make the clothing from, what kind of plants could they make the dye from. The materials are made with what they have at hand, and the rarest goes to the richest. It tells the audience about the environment, the temperature, the hierarchy, the plant life, the actual everyday life of the people living there. What they spend their days doing, how do they wear the clothes, what is practical, or if you are rich, impractical, what kind of work do they do? Do they have symbols representing their place or group? How hot or cold is it? And do they need protection from the sun, sand, the wind, or the sea? The list goes on. What tools did they have? Everything needs to be hand-spun, woven, and sewn with basic tools. They make needles of animal bones. Okay, then maybe they don't have a lot of seams in the garments because it is hard work sewing. There is no machine stitching, no fancy embroidery, but we are humans. We love to embellish. How did they make the clothing beautiful, personal, expensive? What about the armor? It needs to be handmade and not mass-produced. Metal, it is hammered by hand. This leaves imprints in the metal. Then maybe they use this in the design, making elaborate patterns in the hammering. And how does the armor look, feel, sound? What materials? How is it fastened together? How do you get in and out of it? I understand that the movie is not a documentary. It is fantasy, fiction, art. But even the costumes in Lord of the Rings, fiction, by the way, tell you so much about the world, the nature, the people, and the lives they lead. It is based in a living, breathing world where everything matters. Costumes tell a huge part of the story, and it will fill out the world that you create on screen. Why not use it for what it is worth? So I 100% agree, because it's not about sticking to history, because in a movie about cyclops and giants, it really doesn't make any sense to stick to history, but it's about using that sort of source material and inspiration and really digging deep into why of the costumes rather than they look Instagrammable. So when faced with so many possibilities, going for leather vests and white draperies just seems a bit lazy. And the female costumes, even though maybe they're a little bit more varied, they also don't have that feel of, I've sat in this era for months, I know everything about it, and I have so many great ideas now. Most female characters are wearing some sort of gold jewelry and statuesque, usually single-colored gowns. There is a way to make simple, uncomplicated gowns look very luxurious, but I feel like this is not exactly it. They may look expensive, but it's modern expensive, you know? Think prom, think wedding guest, think red carpet. And these are not the associations that you want your ancient fantasy costumes to have. Let's also talk about hair and makeup. Makeup, honestly, not too bad. It seemed that they went for a very natural, minimalistic look. In some scenes, it even looked like the actresses were barefaced, which is fantastic. But then the updos. A lot of the updos were very elaborate, but in a way that made me think of those Vogue Get Ready With Me videos. I have to say, it's probably not helping that almost every woman cast in this movie is an A-list celebrity that we are used to seeing in perfume campaigns, in ads, in commercials of all sorts. At some point I looked at Charlize Theron and I was like, she looks exactly like when she advertised the Dior perfume. And it's not a vibe you want a mythical nymph to give. In general, there were just so many costumes that took me out of the story because they just look odd or weirdly modern. Calypso's fishnet mini, what was that? When Odysseus is leaving the Trojan horse, he has like accidental capris. This might have have been an accident, okay? There was this dress on Lupita that looked exactly like the style that she wears on the red carpet, like a blue dress. And there was an equally odd gold dress that would 100% make sense at a Book Talk fantasy ball. There was a jeans-like hunting vest. Telemachus returning home looked like a Disney prince. And there was also a point where he looked a little bit Tudor. There was a green dress on Penelope that was very reminiscent of 2010 fashions, which is why it's so ironic that the best clothes that we have seen within the Odyssey coming out was Zendaya's press tour. It is also ironic because Law Roach has done a better job depicting the film setting, the Greeks mythology aesthetic, the character that Zendaya is playing than the movie costumes have, while at the same time making them much more interesting than the actual costumes. Maybe minus the stolen Persian earrings, because that's not a good look, and we need to stop seeing stolen artifacts on the red carpet. I think the problem with understated movie costumes is that they have to be on point. If you're not using too much decoration, if you're not going crazy with the structure and the pattern of the costume, if you're using simple shapes and colors and fabrics, the costumes have to be absolutely flawless and thought through, because you don't have much to work with. When it comes to the costumes, we need more passion, we need more energy, we need more curiosity, we need more courage, we need more ideas. Can someone get Law Roach?